Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristin, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to introduce you to my friend and longtime mentor, Dr. William Miller. And I'm going to let him give a big introduction in a moment, but first I just want to tell you some things about him. So Will lives his life as an unfolding story, celebrating wonder, surprise, justice, and adventure, and a few other things which we're going to get into. He's an anthropologist by training, as well as a seasoned family physician, a teacher, a mixed methods researcher, the department chair emeritus in family medicine, an organizational rascal, those are his words, an occasional coyote, also his words, and a grandfather. He's focused his life on co-creating a better world together with emphasis on healing relationships, complexity, ecology, curiosity, and the world of primary care. He currently lives all of the above in the Lehigh River watershed in eastern Pennsylvania and seeks to reimagine general practice for the future and mentor the next generation of physician coyotes, which I think I qualify as, right? I'm one of those physician coyotes that you mentor. Do I get to be in that club?
You are definitely a certified physician coyote.
Yes. So tell us what that means.
Well, coyotes are classic trickster animals, much like ravens and spiders, Anansi the spider from the Caribbean folklore. I particularly love coyotes because they're irrepressible. So they are tricksters. They wander anywhere. Our country has actually tried to eliminate coyotes, and the harder they try, the more of them there are.
Really?
Yes, it's a wonderful trait. And so I love that. They are present. They are somewhat sneaky, but they're also unafraid, incredibly clever, and they're always seeking to turn things inside out and make them more interesting. So they're all about surprise and uncertainty and challenging assumptions, asking wicked questions, all of which make the world a better and more interesting place. So I think physicians need to carry and hold those characteristics with them so that they too can bring healing, which I think has aspects of all of those features.
Yeah, and it's such an important thing to inculcate in our current learners and our healers in the make. So many doctors today have lost that spark, that curiosity, that ability to kind of think outside the box as a trickster or as a assumption challenger. And I don't think that we started that way. You know, I remember this tribe in medical school, and we were different then. What happened?
Well, we were all told there was a right way. And we were all taught to follow that very narrow path. We even called it a certain kind of science. And now we've converted that into artificial intelligence and evidence-based medicine. And as a scientist in one of my roles, that's all great stuff. And it has helped us enormously in helping people. But it's only a tiny bit of the story. We will never know the way. There are lots of ways, and they're different for every living thing. And part of being a healer and the craft of healing is actually discovering what that is for every person with whom you are in relationship. And so the coyote needs to live and reawaken the imaginations of our healers.
Well said. So as we're talking and I'm thinking about all the people I see and have seen over the years who come to me really traumatized by having, been on the receiving end of doctor care that isn't informed by that mindset, that's really repressive and makes people feel like they're wrong for having an experience that doesn't fit into the narrow kind of definition of what a doctor might be expecting. What would you say to those people? How do you help them understand what their experience has been vis-a-vis the healthcare system and their doctors?
Well, I probably would start by thanking them for still showing up. And for the incredible strength and courage that they continue to exhibit and to bring into their lives. And then I would say I'm sorry for some of those experiences that they've had, for folks who didn't listen. And then I would welcome them to embrace some different possibilities.
Nice. I hope everyone could hear that. You might have to replay it a few times to let it sink in. It's powerful hearing that from a seasoned physician. I would love for you to tell us how you got to where you are as a doctor and a healer. Can you tell us the story of your call to medicine?
Yes, I know. You said you were going to ask that question. That's really hard to answer. Because it's about a lived life. And of course, that life always looks different at every next moment in time. But in reflecting, I think the best way to tell it is through three questions that I think I keep asking myself and have, from early on in my life, starting as a child. And the first question would be, who are the allies that have brought me gifts and continue to bring me gifts through my life? And they take many forms at different times. And the three questions that I'm going to ask, I'm going to also suggest are great questions for anybody struggling with any aspect of their life, with badness that has happened to them, with brokenness that has happened to them. I think these three questions help awaken and shift our perceptions and make it easier for us to hear the call that I'll get to. So first is by asking, so who are the allies out there who bring me gifts? And in my childhood, it was women. I think back of who were key people. They were almost all women. They were teachers. They were my mother. And actually, and even the call started with my birth, where my mom was, so this is 1949, gives my age away. And she was always ahead of her time. And so she was reading a book about natural childbirth, which was the book had been written because obstetrics was starting to become a dominant force. And some women were feeling as if they were being militarized post-World War II by obstetrics. And so she wanted to have a natural birth, did all the reading, did all the preparation. And my dad, who was a new general practitioner at the time and enamored with the new field of OB, insisted she go to an obstetrician. And she was basically told how she was going to have her birth and was done electively instead of naturally, and given some medication to stimulate labor, which she overreacted to, went into uterine atony. And after my birth, had excessive bleeding. They made some mistakes. She almost died. Mm. And then a week later, I'm being cared for in the nursery. She's finally strong enough that they can bring me into her. And the first thing she does, this is 1 week old, she puts me to her breast, and her pediatrician comes in and says, "Oh, you're not strong enough to do that. We're taking care of the baby." She told me that my dad didn't want me to know this story growing up, but she told me that story often. Um, and that was, I think, in retrospect, that was clearly the beginning of my call, not only to support the sacred feminine in healing, but also to become involved in healing and to try and change the way that we imagine healthcare and healing. So women early on were important allies, and their stories. When I got to college, that shifted to men. And I had a lot of men. That was perfect timing, because by that point, I was struggling to figure out, what does it mean to be a man in this world? Do men only basically go about looking for women and getting drunk and having parties and playing sports and being militaristic? And there was, well, none of those really fit me. And I discovered really good men, sometimes professors, sometimes other people like myself, friends and colleagues. And we've remained lifetime friends. And so also discovered that no, there are other ways of being man and of integrating these forces in life. And then ongoing colleagues, people like yourself, that you meet as you go along. But that question of continually looking for who are your allies and what gifts do they bring, uh, always kept me excited about life and curious about who I'm going to meet next, and what they might be bringing. The second question is, who calls? Who and what? What is the call? What are the voices that you hear? And I have to say, I have felt called my whole life. I've always struggled to know what that calling is. And I knew it was about healing. I knew it was about brokenness. But my dad, taught me a lot of wonderful things, but he also modeled a lot of things that I'm not, purposefully. And one was, he was over involved, and he used healing as a form of power over. And I didn't want that. So I rejected being a doctor right out of the booths. So I sort of found my way in through anthropology, studying healing and witchcraft and some of that, and had lots of amazing experiences. And it was in those experiences that I discovered, no, I really was being called to be a doctor in spite of all of that. And so I was an anthropologist first, and then became the family doc. And and now I've retired from employment in those areas, still very involved in healing practice and in research. The call is still strong. And so there's certain movies I can't see without just suddenly sobbing the whole movie. And Disney is particularly good, and I really recommend Disney movies, especially the newer ones, that are about women. So two in particular that I've cried a lot to, and I've seen multiple times now, were Moana, where she is being called by the spirit of the ocean. And her grandmother knows it. So these figures that were important to me. Mm-hmm. So man, when that call comes and she's in communication with that spirit, I'm just water on the floor.
Forget about it.
At my feet. And now the new one, Frozen II, which I think is even better than Frozen 1. I cried that whole darn movie because it's a calling movie. And the music is all about that call. And it is all about surprise and going into the unknown and getting lost and taking risk. and then having everything fail and be in the pits of despair, and the little voice and the song to just do the next right thing. And Anna sings herself from deep in the cave on the floor to rise, walk to the light, and do the next right thing. That's just powerful. That's the call. What's that voice? Can we hear it? Can we clear out all the stuff? Look to your allies, the first question. They will help. And then the last question is, what changes and surprises me? And so I like to look for those things. It's the startling things that upset assumptions. It's the coyote. It was recognizing, oh, I am more like the coyote than I am like these really certain animals. No, it's the disruption that actually turns out to be helpful. Just as sickness and brokenness become the sources of our greatest strengths and the gifts that we then get to bring to others. And part of healing is being able to make that shift from this sickness being a burden and a pain to how is it a gift and helping something new grow forth in me. And when you look for surprises, they're all around. And so my life has been filled with those, from when I was studying witchcraft to actually witnessing death from witchcraft, but also witnessing amazing healing I still have no explanation for how some of the healings I saw occurred. Although I've got some hints, but it's more about process than the specific stuff. So that's kind of those three questions. Who are the allies that bring us gifts, and who are they, and what have they brought? Who and what is calling? Can we hear those voices and hear them as a call, not as an annoyance or as, no, I'm not going to do that. I want to reject that. Sort of as Elsa does in Frozen II in the beginning. No, I don't want to hear this anymore, but she must. And Moana also. And then what changes and surprises us? And to actually embrace that. And sometimes even purposefully go out and get lost so that you can be surprised. I know one of the fun things I'm doing right now is with my 7-year-old grandson. So we had a whole 10 days together last summer for the first extended time away from his parents. And the first thing we did was I would take him out into the woods and just have him run. He would run through the woods, and then I'd ask him, where are we? And how do we get home? And of course, he had no idea where we were. He had never been in these woods. And to get him to enjoy the thrill and the fun of discovering how we find our way home. And I think we all need to do that regularly.
I love that you brought up, first of all, I love the image of your grandson running through the woods and wondering what his parents might say to that. And I'm also really wanting to hear more from you about your connection to the woods and your connection to the earth and to nature. And in particular, for this audience, many people in this audience have been through illnesses that they relate to nature, that they feel betrayed by nature. Tick bites, for example, carrying Lyme disease are on the top of people's minds who are dealing with that particular ailment. And a lot of my patients with Lyme, for example, don't want to hear about the importance of getting out in nature. Like, it's just a trigger for them. So I really want to sort of bask in your reframe around nature and winter and all things related to, not humans that can benefit us.
Yes, I also really don't like ticks. Now, I have never had chronic Lyme. I've always caught it early. So I've been very fortunate. And they are, so I still go out in spite of them. and many other things. I was very lucky. So growing up, my parents were very strict at home, but I was privileged. They had a little place in the Poconos, and we had different rules there. So at home, oh, all kinds of strict rules, tight boundaries. I was never good enough, blah, blah, blah. But many of us have been there. But at Blue Heron, there was only one rule, which was dinners at 7. It was the only rule. So it's this huge expanse surrounded by state game lands. And we would drive up there, and my parents would go off and do whatever they were doing at the cabin. I'd disappear into the woods. This is starting at age 3 and 4. And I would wander, and I got myself into all kinds of messes, from yellow jacket stings, snake bites, totally lost. I also learned, because I rarely made dinner at 7, to create stashes of hidden food out in the woods.
Did you
So I
bury
also,
them like a little
yep,
squirrel?
yep. And often those stashes were discovered before I got back to them by some of my friendly critters. Mm-hmm. And so the woods have always been, for me, a place where I learned to discover my own resilience and robustness, and to develop a sense as, life is going to throw me a whole lot of bad stuff, but I'll figure it out. This is where I learned that I could figure it out no matter what happened. And I've continually sought that out. It's also where, because you're out there, and you have to befriend nature, because it's all you got when you're out there, you discover that it is just rich with, talk about allies and gifts. It's rich with all of that. And you're more awake because your survival depends on it. And so your senses alert. You smell better. You hear better. You see better and more. You feel better. You become aware of the others around you, even if you can't see them. And you actually discover how it is we humans survived before we had all this stuff that we have made to protect us.
Right.
We didn't have it for tens of thousands of years. And we did really pretty well. And I know how. We have these amazing skills that are so undeveloped. Now, there's a quote from William Wordsworth, which is going to trigger all these folks. And the quote is, "Nature never did betray the heart that loved her." And that's full of all kinds of traps. And I believe it's entirely true, despite all the traps. And so when I was younger, in my privileged state, having survived all those experiences, I believed it was really true, in a simplistic sense, that nature never really did betray the heart that loved her. But then I saw nature cause all kinds of trouble and be harmful to lots of people. Ticks, just one of many things. And we read grizzly bear attacks, the list can go on and on, where nature seems really cruel and difficult. And that's true. Nature is very difficult and challenging, and bad stuff happens, as is true in life, because nature isn't separate from life. And so if you understand that all of that nature is this whole entity, then actually it never does betray the heart that loves it. It just becomes very complex. Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned, of course, winter is my favorite season. And I'm just back from 10 days in Yellowstone, cross-country skiing and hanging out in a little yurt with some friends, with unbelievable experiences with bisons and wolves and coyotes and otters. Oh, in my next life, I really want to be an otter. How any animal can simply just be playful
There's got to be a dark side to the shadow of the otter, right? There's got to be.
Well, so I spent several hours watching the otters, looking, because I thought there has to be a dark side to otters. I have nothing to report.
Okay, it's an open question.
It was only play. I mean, they have, so I just imagine you're in the Yellowstone Grand Canyon, so these steep cliffs and these rushing river, the Yellowstone River going through it. And what does the otter do? It slithers on up to the top and zooms down in a slide on its belly, splop in the water, and then kind of rolls around a little, sticking its tummy in the air, and then just sort of turns around, pokes up, looks to see if anybody was watching. I so want to do that. But good things would not happen if I tried to do it.
Well, in this
winter, I mean, people talk about winter and winters being dark. Well, let me say, so days are short in Yellowstone in the winter, 5 to 7 feet of snow, but it's sunglasses for the entire 8 hours of light, or you'll be snowblind within 30 minutes max. It's so bright. The whiteness and the light, even when there's no sunshine and it's gray and snowing, is just your whole body. I mean, it fills me with enough light for the rest of the year. So no, it's only dark if you don't go out. But winter is full of light, and we forget that. So for those who are afraid of nature because they think it has betrayed them, I encourage them to find their coyote so that they can begin small steps to venture back out, recognizing that nature has this wholeness of this tension of bad and good. You know, it's all perspective, because it actually has what they need to heal. So that may be where the harm happened, but that's also where the healing happens. And that's the whole. And that's where the brokenness gets mended into a strength. And so, yes, it's frightening, but little steps.
Love it. Thank you.
It will gift you.
I want to share that the gift of just hearing you talk about winter. I think I might have accosted you every winter in residency just to peel a story out of you that helped me stay connected to my belief and hope that we would have spring again, because I used to get really down in winter until I bought my happy lamp and started getting outside with my dog. It used to really.
And just FYI, no ticks in the winter.
Well, no ticks is not entirely accurate. They're active down to, I think, 29 degrees. So correct. They are still around, but really, really cold winters, which we haven't experienced here yet this year. Sadly. Yes. But yeah, in general, very true. Much fewer. So I want to transition using the tree, which is part of nature, but really to kind of move into a discussion of complexity, because my understanding of complexity really began in residency as a trainee physician coyote under you, and with your tree metaphor. And I want metaphor. Will you talk us through that tree image? Because it's really at the heart of what we're doing in this little healing grove, this little forest of healers and seekers together. So I want you to talk about it, and I want to share that with everybody. Just hearing you explain it.
Happy to do that. But I want to you started with complexity. And so I think I've learned so much from complexity. And in many ways, my understanding of complexity helped me discover the tree and And actually, I think the more important qualities that exist within the tree. So I want to talk about a few concepts. These will seem like, how can these things be important? But they have everything to do with the tree, and what we do as healers. And there are only a few. One is the whole idea of interdependence. So one of the things that complexity teaches is that everything is connected. There is no independence of anything. So unlike a machine, which humans make, which has all of these parts, each of which has its own existence, and you can put the parts together in multiple ways, and it will end up doing very specific things. That is not complex. It could be simple machine. It could be an incredibly complicated machine, but it will always do what it's intended to do. And you can take it all apart and you can put it all together, and it is the sum of its parts. Something that's complex, like anything living, has none of those qualities. You can't take it apart and put it back together again. It will be different. It's not the sum of its parts, because every part is interdependent. What each little part of a complex organism or living thing does depends on what is happening around it and what the other parts are doing. So it changes what it is. That interdependence, I mean, that undermines our dominant culture and its belief somehow it's about me, I'm distinct, I'm an individual, I have to somehow heal myself. I mean, it goes on and on and on, all revolving around me, I have to be self-reliant and all that. None of that's true. It's not how the world is. It's not how we are. It's why my first question is, who are my allies? What gifts do they have to bring? Because I'm entirely dependent on them. On my own, I never grow up. We don't survive as living things on our own. So that interdependence, and the tree, completely based on that interdependence. But what comes with that interdependence is surprise and uncertainty, which we've learned to fear. We like things to be predictable, controllable, the same. I don't want to have to change. Well, there is no such thing as no change. There's always change. Everything changes, and it changes in ways we can't control, and it changes in ways that are uncertain and unpredictable, because it's all contingent, because we're all interdependent, and it's all interdependent. And we don't actually manage and thrive and change and manage the things we can unless we accept the overall uncertainty and actually relish surprise for what it can bring, for the inherent silver lining, if you wish. So two constructs and complexity. The other is the idea of self-organization and attractors. So one of the things we learn in complexity science is that life, there are these powerful attractors, and life quickly organizes itself around them. And one of the things science, especially biology and ecology, has helped discover are what some of those key attractors are. For human beings, it's stories. Stories are how we self-organize our lives. So Will, organizational rascal and coyote Will, I'm self-organized around a set of stories that I hold about myself. Mm-hmm. That's how I perceive, that's how I behave, that's how my body comes into being and remains healthy or becomes unhealthy. And each of us is that, and we collectively are that. And so the stories we tell shape us. And stories we reimagine can reshape us.
Mm.
They're incredibly powerful. And it takes advantage of that interdependence. It takes advantage of that surprise. And so another key element of complexity. And then last is the idea of simple rules. So complexity sounds like, my God, it's overwhelming. What can I possibly do? One of the lovely paradoxes, and paradox is a brilliant thing. I love the paradoxes of life. One of the great paradoxes of complexity is if something's complex, there's some simple rules that will help you thrive amidst that complexity. Whereas if something's complicated, the solution has to be complicated. Oh, interesting. So examples of simple rules. One of the ones I love that lots of people know, and this actually relates a lot to healing, because we get very carried away with nutrition. What diet should I eat? What food should I eat? How should I eat? How's that going to help my body? So this may actually be disturbing again to some of the folks, but I love Michael Pollan has 3 simple rules to cut through all of it. Eat food, mostly plants, not too much. What? Yeah, that's freaking brilliant. So what do you mean? You have to understand what those mean. Eat food, that means real food, whole food, close to the source, as close to where that food is grown in the living world, in the state in which it's grown, mostly plants, and not too much. Wow. We all did that. Just right. Boom. Well, those are simple rules that actually manage the complexity. And it allows you to thrive in the complexity because it makes so much food available in so many kinds of ways. Just it opens up options. In healing, for the craft of general practice, 3 simple rules for me are recognize, prioritize, and personalize. So that's how I think about doing the craft. And I know there's a whole, and the tree, which is part of what you learned, the tools of turtlecraft, our name for general practice healing. The tree is actually all about those 3 rules. So when we are with our patients, people who have fallen into the mud in life, and we're helping to support them and bring them back into life, first we have to recognize what's going on, but not just what's going on, but who is this person and what has happened and what is around them and what's available to them. So it's this whole process of recognizing. And then we have to prioritize because we can never deal with everything at the same time. So some things have to come first. And then finally, it's personalizing whatever we've learned together. So it's for that person. It's their story that they're going to live and change. 3 simple rules, but those rules embrace the whole of the craft. So that's what I mean by simple rules. And unique feature of complexity. One time impossible to fully predict and control, and yet manageable in a way we can thrive through the use of discerned simple rules. So with that in mind, from complexity, the tree. So the tree became a metaphor for me for essentially the tree of healing. And by that, it's both a tree of naming, and in medical school, we called that diagnosis. I don't use the word diagnosis except when I must in certain circles. Because to me, right, because diagnosis is really about naming. And diagnosis seems like it's makes us look to a pathology book or some medical book, and it's got to fit these things. Well, no, lots of things people have don't fit those categories. Lots more than we pretend to think. But everyone needs a name for what they're experiencing, because a name helps that enter a story. Without a name, it can't be in the story.
Hmm.
And so it has to have a name. So part of our role is naming. And fortunately, the tree of healing has 1 billion names. Some not yet known, but they'll be discoverable. And then, of course, it's the tree of caring, which we call treatments in medicalese. So every brokenness needs a name to enter the story, and then it needs some actions that are going to help it. That's the caring part. Because if we don't have names for the caring, even, it can't enter the story. So this is that tree. And the tree became about sort of 2 reasons. One, because I just am so, as an anthropologist, I was exasperated by this mind-body dualism and our culture's insistence on always thinking dualistically. And it was not how I experienced anything in life. No, life is complex. It holds all these tensions, all these paradoxes. They aren't this or that. It's always and. And so I needed a metaphor for healing that didn't do the dualism. And I realized, oh, well, it's just us. We're like a tree. And it's completely interdependent. So this tree has roots, and these roots go way, way down into our earth, the source of all life. Of course, only when that life is in relationship with the sun and the sky. So the whole, again, always the whole. And so these roots that go way down, and then it turns out, this is so exciting about trees, that those roots actually connect with the whole communication system. Basically, the whole freaking earth is connected in communication. Wow, okay, so we're that tree. So I am a tree, and my roots are connected to everything else alive on the planet. And I'm not sure what's alive and what's not alive. I'm convinced now that rocks live too in their own unique ways and have an energy and a consciousness that one can experience, and they communicate. So that, and then it reaches up and it branches out, where it interacts with everything outside and around, and things fly onto it, things crawl into it, things play around it. It calls in the sun. It sort of hides in the shadows of the moon and soaks in that light. And then it leaves and it blooms and new things grow and it creates seeds and it spreads. And it's okay. So there you go. Complexity, interdependence, all the things that we just talked about when we talked about complexity. There it is in the tree, and it's one living thing. So if you ask the mind to stand up, all of you has to stand up because it's not a separate thing. If you ask the body to stand up, it's the same thing. So one tree, there it is. And then for this particular tree of healing, I imagined 5 big limbs with lots of little limbs, leafing out as the tree grows. And as healers mature, your tree also gets bigger and fuller and richer. And as patients grow out of patienthood and back into personhood and living, their tree also grows bigger and bushier, and gives more seeds, all those things. Those 5 limbs represent what I think are sort of the branches of healing and caring. And it helps translate as a metaphor into our sort of more scientific language, dominant culture. So one is the physical limb. Another is the emotional limb. Third would be that cognitive limb. Fourth would be the social, and fifth, the spiritual. And for this, let me just use pain as a great example, because the 5 limbs actually manifest physically in the anatomy and physiology of our body. So when any of us experience pain, be it short-term pain, long-term pain, simple pain, or complex pain, there are 5 physical pathways that get activated actually beautifully represent the 5 limbs. So when you experience pain, when I experience pain, there's this ancient tract that snakes share with us. Paleo-spinal, old spinal thalamic tract. So it's out here on our skin. We have all these receptors, and we bump a tree against the rough bark. Ouch. Well, so the first thing we experience is ouch. And that's a feeling of ouch. Nothing else. I don't know where the ouch is. I just feel ouch. And I'm a little bit angry, a little bit sad. That's the paleo-spinal thalamic tract. It worked its way up and it ends in our limbic system, sort of our little reptilian brain. And it's ouch. So for instance, if you injure a snake, it'll writhe because it feels an ouch, but it actually has no idea where it hurts because it only has the paleo-spinal thalamic tract. But we're mammals, so we have a second tract called the newer, in terms of evolution, spinal thalamic tract. And it goes all the way up and has branches up into the regions of our cortex that have locations on our body. So our cortex sort of maps out to hand, arm. It's very fast, and it says your hand, your left hand, that ouch, this is where it comes from. So it locates it physically. So that's your physical pain limb. And the paleo is your emotional pain limb. And of course, as soon as we know there's an ouch and where it is, those cortical connections spread to our other cortical part of our cortex, which is all about our thinking. Mm-hmm. And it's impossible for a human being to go ouch and know where it is and not start trying to figure out what just happened. We can't help ourselves. We overthink everything. It is what we do.
We're really good at that. It's a strength, I would say.
Oh, yeah. So the cognitive limb and those cognitive branches physically. And of course, we can't help but share our story. And other human beings love to be able to comment on your story. So we are a tribe, and, be it whether we tweet it out or we actually call up somebody, or we can't wait to see our colleague at work and tell them about this. Scrape my hand on this. I remember when, or somebody, and the whole story gets blown out of proportion. That's the social limb. So, and we overtake seriously what others have to say and suggest. So we're highly suggestible. And we quickly start, this little ouch of rubbing on bark now becomes quite dramatic. So it's got this theatrical thing about it because we're social. And anytime we experience pain, we are reminded that we are vulnerable and mortal and easily frightened beings. And that's the spiritual limb. And it turns out that physically, there are descending pathways. Our body contains its own morphine, its own ability to suppress pain, and it can be activated. That's what a lot of the shamans and traditional healers do, is they actually work very strongly and powerfully on the spiritual, those descending pathways, and activating them without the use of external medications. And that's the spirit. Those are the 5 limbs, and they're all present in pain. And people who have complex pain that goes on for a long time, a lot of the folks that you're caring for, mm-hmm. you can't begin to have your life happen beyond that pain until you actually begin to unpack all 5 of those aspects of the pain. All pain carries all 5 of those storylines. There is an ouch component. There is a location component. There is all the thoughts you've had about it and the attributions and judgments that you have made. It's always got a social component. What others have said, including doctors, we're part of that. So you suggested those patients who's come to me after all those bad experiences. And the spiritual. This pain has deep meaning and purpose in your life. It changes everything. And you have to come to grips with that and integrate that into who you are and what your calling voice is. So those are the limbs on the one tree, and each of those limbs contains a whole list of possibilities of names for what is troubling you, and they all have possible healing modalities on them. And you can, I mean, we could go on for hours listing all the things that are on those limbs. And my mantra is keep swinging. Keep swinging from limb to limb. If something's not working on this limb, do this limb. And when you have what many of your patients have, this very complex, chronic badness and brokenness, you need to work on all the limbs. Mm-hmm. But here's the secret. Because of interdependence, no matter which limb you approach the problem from, it will impact all the others. So there's always something more you can do. And each of us carries all of that possibility within us. And the role of a healer is to just tap it. That's why I love the image on your Healing Grove of the windows and the great tree, and some with the light on and some without. And the lights, those are the windows you want to enter because there's a gift in there. The ones with the lights out, it's not ready. Don't go there yet. It will light up when its time comes.
Well, it brings us back to your original three questions of like, where are my allies? Like, where are the gifts that are already available to me? Those are behind the lighted windows. Those are the things that I'm feeling called to and excited about and feel kind of connected to and bringing me joy. So yeah, I don't know what else there is to say after that. I mean, that was so beautiful. We're going to have to package this and give it to the current residents who don't get to hear this from you firsthand, right?
Well, they still get to hear it firsthand.
They do.
They do. I still show up for Foundations Month and do participate in the first presentations of the foundations of the tools of turtlecraft.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. That's good.
I can't help myself.
So the future physician coyotes are still having access to you. How about people in this garden, in this little forest? What if they wanted to learn more from you, about you? Are there any routes for them to do that, short of watching this video 27 times?
Hopefully they don't watch this video 27 times. I would rather they actually go out and take a hike. It's all out there. It's all out there. That's a really good question. So I don't currently have an easy way for that to happen. I don't have a website. I don't have any social media presence. I'm actually thrilled with that. So just FYI, one of the other things, so I was in Yellowstone. That was 10 days where I was disconnected from everything. No cell phone, no anything, because it's not out there. And I encourage folks to take those breaks. They're amazing.
So this has been so awesome. I'm so grateful to you for your time, Will. Before we end, I just want to ask, is there anything else that you would want to say to people who might be struggling, might feel isolated, might feel overwhelmed and out of touch with their own call due to illness? What would you have them know?
I would have them know the 3 questions. I would have them know that there are lots of allies out there waiting for them and eager to meet them and share their gifts. One of the things that happens when we become trapped in our brokenness and our extreme sense of vulnerability is we get isolated and distrustful because we've been harmed and we have felt betrayed. But hiding will only intensify all of that. And so risking, and these are all courageous people, as I said to start with, I am always impressed. They do somehow rise and take another step. But in doing so, look for allies. They're there. And they can take many forms, not just humans. So go and search, risk, go in search of allies. And they have a voice, and it is calling. So that voice actually never quiets. It can get really hidden because we have packed it away in a little corner that we've forgotten where that corner is. It's like the little object that we hid so we'd never lose it. And now we can't find it because we can't remember that hiding place. So the voice may be like that. It's there. So trust that it's there. And actually, in seeking your allies, they will help you locate it. More eyes are better than just yours. And that third question of what changes and surprises us. So every time you're feeling the brokenness, the hurt, the vulnerability, the exasperation, the sense that your life has disappeared, has escaped you, think about what surprise may be hidden there. So yes, all of that is true. I will always accept the story the patient shares. It's their story. And there's more to that story. You haven't uncovered everything in that story. The story still has to surprise you, and the surprises and is going to change you, and some of those changes are more than you can currently imagine. And so those 3 questions together give you access to all the limbs on your tree. But also maybe go inside your own tree. What's there? Go out in some of those limbs you may have forgotten about. Or follow down into those roots where it's interconnected with all else.
I think that's the perfect place to end. Thank you so much.
Kristin, thank you. You are a fantastic physician, Coyote.
Thanks, Will.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove Playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.